Good evening, good evening, good evening, and thank you for joining us here on blackdoctor.org. I am LSD, your host and moderator for this evening, and this is our ongoing series called Open Your Eyes, and this is our series about diabetic retinopathy, of course, with the man of the hour, and that is Dr. Joe Coney. Tonight is the sixth of our six-part series of the second season of our six-part series on diabetic retinopathy. And tonight we're going to be talking about the future. We're going to be talking about what's important for Black people, in particular, in respect to clinical trials. Because we know that new treatments, new medications, new anything does not get discovered without it being in a trial first. And if we're not participating, then we are not sure if those results are going to be as effective on people of color if we're not part of the trial. So we're going to get all into that tonight. We've got the right man because Dr. Coney has been a principal investigator on trials before. So he's going to tell you all the ins and outs and kind of assuage some of those fears that you might have about clinical trials and hopefully motivate you or to motivate somebody else to get into a trial. So that's the summary. A couple of things I need for you to do before we break on Dr. Coney. Number one, I need you to let us know where you're watching us from. Drop that in the comment section. We'd like to know where people are watching us from all over the world. So please drop your city and state, rep your city there in the comments. Number two, if you know somebody that needs this information, please, please, please share it on your page or tag them in the comments so they can get this information. We like to get it out to as many people as possible, and we're asking for your help just to do that. And number three, if you have any questions at all about the subject that we're talking about tonight, or if you want to sneak one in about something else that's not going on, I see Springfield, Missouri in the house. Isn't that where the Simpsons is from, the Springfield? Isn't that the Simpsons? Or is that Springfield, Illinois? My bad. I don't want else. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, number three is please ask your questions. This is your time to get the information that you need about this particular topic, clinical trials in general, diabetic retinopathy. Get your questions asked and we will get them answered. So I will say that. And the last thing I'm going to say is this information is also for information purposes only. If you are a patient of that being treated for diabetic retinopathy, do not take anything that we say tonight without speaking first to your primary care physician. Do not make any changes to your treatment plan without speaking first to your physician. Okay, I have to get that disclaimer out there. So let's meet the man of the hour, and that is the man, you know him, you love him, also known as Dr. Coney.
Ellis, thank you for having me, man. I can't believe it's our second season. It's our 12th video together, and man, it has really been a pleasure. So thank you again for having me.
No problem. And I'm just going to say for the viewers that are thinking like, that's not where Ellis is normally sitting. I am sitting at a Starbucks. I'm going to be full disclosure. This is all about transparency. I am sitting at a Starbucks because life does not end, but the show must go on. And so I had to take my son to his baseball practice tonight. Had to be a dad. And so I'm in Starbucks, but we had to get this show out. And so I am camped out in a Starbucks, bringing the show to you while he is practicing baseball and hopefully get a scholarship so I can not have to pay for too much of college. But that's another show. So, Dr. Coney, I heard you had a full day of surgery.
I did. I'm hot off the trail as well. I just got in here literally about 10 minutes ago. So I'm fired up, man. Just had a long day in clinic. Some days you have challenging days and long days, but life goes on, and this is real life.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad that we're able to make this time to educate your audience.
Absolutely. I need to tell them about the light. This light coming down is bringing shadows all the way down. I needed to bring my ring light, but I think that would have been a bit too too much in here. So tonight is a topic that you are intimately familiar with, and that's clinical trials. And so I want to start off with just an easy question so our audience can kind of get a feel, because we've heard those terms a lot here, particularly during the pandemic when it first started, because that's how the vaccines were developed. And so we heard a lot about clinical trials. But unfortunately, due to the situation that was going on, the clinical trials got a bad rap. They got a bad kind of connotation because of all of the misinformation and disinformation going around the pandemic and the development of the vaccines. So kind of help our audience understand what are clinical trials and what are their purpose and what they're intended to do?
Well, those are really, really great questions. And I think first you want to understand that there are multiple types of clinical trials, and there are different phases. There's phase one, two, and phase three clinical trials. Most times with the clinical trials, we're thinking most time phase three trials, which is before a drug goes to market or before it gets approved through the FDA. And this is after the drug has been found to be safe. This is after it's been found to be efficacious, but you need a significant amount of numbers to see if the efficacy and safety is the same for a general population. When it comes to diabetes, I think that well, let me back up. I think clinical trials in general are important for our community and the population that I particularly see, particularly Black and Brown people, because typically we are not well represented in clinical trials. And people don't know that things like multiple sclerosis, is the most debilitating ethnicity in Blacks. And so, uh, those individuals are typically not involved in clinical trials. Same thing with prostate cancer and breast cancer. The mortality in those populations is as high as 40%, but yet you have less than 10% of people being enrolled in clinical trials. It's the same thing that we see in diabetics. And again, diabetes disproportionately affects African Americans to a different degree, and to a greater degree than other ethnicities. But yet, in clinical trials, we have a very dismal participation rate. And this could really be from a lot of reasons. And I think this is really where, you know, I think where we really have to address where the issues are. By right, I think that Blacks have a right to be skeptical of being in trials. They have been wrongly done in the past from previous trials. We all know about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Even when there was a treatment for syphilis, these individuals were still in those trials, and people were allowed to advance to further disease without having therapy. And these were funded trials. The same thing that happened to Indians in certain trials, as well as to the Jewish population. So there are certain populations that may just be somewhat resistant to trials. But the reason why I think that people should be part of trials is because we want to make sure that when medications are brought to the forefront, when they are approved for therapy, that they are efficacious and safe for all people. And sometimes we just don't know if those medications are safe in everyone because we don't have the data points. We don't have the population that is receiving that drug to make sure that drug is just as good in the majority of the people in that trial compared to all people, because the trial is only a small snippet, and that snippet is how drugs get approved. And so sometimes these trials can be as small as 1,200 people that get the drug approved through the FDA. Now, it does take some time, 1, 2, 3 years sometimes before that drug get to market, but you only study that particular population, and sometimes we just don't have the results we need for Blacks. And we just want to make sure, again, that the drugs that we bring to market is really efficacious for all people.
And that's a great way to explain it. And I'm gonna put it in the junior high format. So, folks, if you have what Doc is talking about is if you have 100 people that are in a trial and they're trying to see if a treatment or a drug is good for everybody. Black people rank about 13 to 14% of the population. But based statistically speaking, there's only going to be about three people of color, Black people, in that trial of 100. And so there's not enough Black people in that trial to be able to determine the overall effects it's going to have when it is given to 3,000, Black people. And so we need to match the goal for us. I would say I would like it for it to be higher, but at least we need to match our population percentage as a percentage of people in these trials, so we can have enough robust numbers so people like Dr. Coney can say, hey, this is a significant enough people to say, hey, it's good for Black people. And not just that, there's the other piece of it could be a good medicine, but Black people might need a different dosage amount. We won't be able to determine that if we're not there participating. And so those are some of the things, those are some of the challenges that people of color need to kind of set our fears aside and not saying forget. And I really want to be clear about that. We're not saying forget, but we do have to set our fears aside because we could be missing out on some groundbreaking medications and treatment or not getting results that we need from those treatments because we weren't in the trials. Was that a good kind of junior high?
That was excellent. That was excellent, and I think that last piece is the most vital. Modern medicine has really advanced quite a bit, and um, the medicines tend to be more effective. It feels over the generations, and so if you are if you are waiting for therapy, let's say there's no therapy available and there's a trial that's going on, and that trial shows positive results, it may take you 2 or 3 years to get that medication. Where if you're in a trial, you could be cured, or
Right.
your lifespan could have been extended, or something could have been in remission when it comes to cancer. And so I think that people need to understand that these trials are there to also offer medications that may be very therapeutic and have very positive effects that could prolong their longevity, whether it's sight, whether it's from cancer, which we're looking at, life of living, um, and that's critical. And by not being enrolled in those trials, they actually may be missing out.
One of my favorite examples of that, Doc, that we have a video. It's on our YouTube page, so if you want to go and check it out. So I'm not just making this up. You can go see the gentleman that I'm about to share his story. He was a gentleman over 30 years ago. He got diagnosed with leukemia, and the doctor told him he had 5 years. Now he had 5 years left to live. He's going to die within 5 years, and that was 30 years ago. So he went around. He was trying to get transfusions. He was trying to get transplants. He was doing all he can. And then somebody approached him and said, "Hey, there's a clinical trial. Can't guarantee it's going to work, but let's try it." That clinical trial prolonged his life long enough to where he got to another clinical trial with a different medication, and that prolonged his life to get into another clinical trial. He has done 3 clinical trials, and right now he is a living testimony to living over 30 years with leukemia, where the doctor said he was going to die within 5 years. He's been alive over 30 years, and now he's still around to share his story. He's had grandchildren and all that. He's experienced his life because he decided to get into clinical trials. And so that's just one of many, many kind of just powerful stories of people getting involved in clinical trials. And like what Dr. Coney was illustrating, it really can extend your life. Because if you wait those 3 years, he may not have, if you waited for those 3 years to get that medication, he may not have lasted that 3 years. But he got in a trial and he participated, and it saved his life.
And when I talk to patients, and sometimes they are on the fence or they're thinking about trials, there's a lot of, I think, barriers that they come in. For one, the amount of time they spend in the office. Number two, how far they live from the trial center. The number three, the cost of a trial.
Right.
These are all big things. Number four, whether they're going to get a placebo drug or actually the actual medication. Yeah, and these are all valid points. And I'll just pick, we can address them all or one by one if you feel they're important. But I think one of the most important ones that I see is cost. Oftentimes, when you're in a clinical trial, particularly for my African American patients who are either underinsured or no insurance at all, I'm able to give them, if I get them in the trial and they qualify, treatment that costs them no money whatsoever. We try to make sure that the patients are whole when they're in their trial, and that's one of the big benefits of being in trial, getting access to therapy that is beneficial, that's no cost to you, that's ordinarily not covered by insurance. So that I think is a big. We've also addressed some of the burdens when it comes to how far someone lives from a trial center. We know that's a burden for patients. If you only have one car in on a household and you have to come in multiple times, you may have to rely on someone. Well, most times today, we're able to have a car service that will able to pick that patient up and bring them to the clinic, wait for them, and then take them home. It's like having their personal concierge service. So this is another way that we've tried to decrease that burden. Um, the biggest burden I see, despite those, is just language that we have in talking about a trial. We've developed some videos talking about how clinical trials can be effective, particularly in the underserved community. And I think it's really important to have verbiage in that trial that's written at least at a second and third grade language where people can understand exactly what's going on. So they know up front, what to be concerned about. Trials today are done in a safe manner. There are these gateways that we have to abide by, these laws per se, to make sure that things are done ethically, in a way which people rights are respected and people understand both the upsides and the downsides to those particular trials. The great thing about the trial is that, not only do you have someone like me who's a principal investigator in trials, but I have a whole host of team just dedicated to the trials. They're called clinical coordinators. Those clinical coordinators are someone that is always available 24/7. If there's any issues whatsoever, they have a direct line to speak to someone about what's going on, any questions they may have, something that may have happened within the clinic, or if they have a side effect of a problem. They're like really VIP patients. There's always someone waiting for them in a clinic. They're not put in with everyone else. They are treated completely separate and completely different. So there are a lot of benefits. And when you're in a trial, all the T's have to be crossed, all the I's have to be dotted. This has to go through the FDA. And so you get the best exam each time you come in and you see the exact same people. So they give you comfort. A lot of patients don't have comfort around physicians. That's where the communication kind of comes in. So you build up this communication piece with the physician and a whole host of teams, that clinical team that is working on that trial, to help you feel comfortable through this whole process. I like to call that a journey, because most times the trials can be 1 or 2 and sometimes 3 years. And so these individuals, they kind of form, they become like families. I can't tell you how many patients I've had that had completed trials 10, 15 years ago. They're always asking about my clinical coordinators because such a wonderful experience they had. And they really are very grateful, and they're thankful for the time that they put into the trial. And so I think those are some of the benefits that people may not see, but they should be aware of.
You're bringing up a great point, because I think as uh, we have evolved and the technology has gotten better and the medication's gotten better, so has the way trials have been designed gotten better, right? Because initially, years ago, I want to say decades ago, probably now, they were at university centers, right? They're really kind of concentrated around university and medical centers. Now, trials have realized, hey, they've had to diversify. They've had to reach out. That's why rides are now being offered. There are some trials that offer childcare services. If you can't have a child, they will get childcare services. Some trials will let you come in on Saturdays, right? Before it's like Monday through Friday. They'll let you come in through Saturdays. Some of them are working right through your local pharmacy, and they'll have a place right there, so you don't have to go travel that far from home. So they are becoming much more easier, and the buzzword of the day is accessible to the people that they're trying to connect with. And so I think you're making a great point there. So, and that piece is you're getting the best care, right? Because they want you to get through this trial successfully. So you're going to get the best care. They're going to monitor everything. You're getting the latest care, and you're getting all of this at no cost. And so if you're diabetic and you're entering a trial on diabetic retinopathy, guess what? They're going to make sure that you're getting the best care. They're going to be monitoring your blood sugar and all this other stuff as you're going through the trial. So you're getting care, you're getting the latest care at no cost. And so it really is a benefit to that. So, Doc, I guess let me ask you this: what are some of the challenges when it comes to that you have faced when it comes to recruiting people, particularly people of color, to get them into these clinical trials?
Well, I think number one is just trust. Um, trust, as I mentioned earlier, is a problem just because of the stigma that comes along with clinical trials, not really knowing what that trial involves. And I think that can really be discussed with, on a one-on-one relationship with the patient, and really, I will include the family on that discussion on how to build that trust in talking about trials. But I think that's the number one thing. The biggest barrier is that doctors sometimes just don't ask patients. They may not feel comfortable in talking to people that don't look like them about a clinical trial. We assume that Mrs. Johnson may not want to be involved in a trial, so that's our own implicit bias. So implicit bias is another barrier, and we don't give individuals an option because we don't think they may be interested um, in a trial. Um, you know, the other barriers we talked about before, I think you know how institutions how patients feel about an institution, or how they feel about how the institution have benefited their community, plays a role too. I think it's really important for hospitals, for clinics to play a strong role in the community, because if the community don't feel the hospital have their needs and haven't addressed their issue. Let's say you've come in to emergency room and you had pain and you're left with, let's say, no pain medication, and you felt like you really had a legitimate reason to have pain medication. You don't have a lot of trust, or something happened in that hospital. And so the community is very small. The community talks. And so it doesn't, it just takes a few voices in the community to say, you know what, I don't like this institution. And so you happen to find yourself there, but you have a problem. You don't want to be there already. Now I'm going to do talk to someone about a clinical trial. And so you can see how that just rubs someone way, someone the wrong way. So people feel that institutions, whether it's policies, whether it's laws, they haven't had a fair shake in the situation. And so breaking down those barriers, I think are critically important. And again, that goes back to that trust, to that communication, to the doctor feeling comfortable and talking to that patient, and especially being a navigator. I think hospitals and clinics shouldn't want to be in the community only when they want something, but they should always be in the community. They should be there for fundraisers. They should be there for different events, and do health drives so people feel comfortable in who they are. Just don't be there when you want something, or do a trial and don't return and give the community feedback. So I think that some of the barriers we have is that things are done and patients don't know what happened. And so one way to continue with that commitment to communication and having an impact in the community is giving feedback. Have a navigator in that community that can be your spokesperson, that can speak the same language, that can help individuals understand one another. And when that trial leaves, you're still there. You're still going to the picnics that's happening. You're going to the YMCA's. You're participating in the health fairs and the breast walks, all these sort of things. I think is really, really important. Those are the biggest barriers. We can get around geography. We can supply the cars. We can help with the child care. We can reduce the cost. But if you don't get the communication piece right, nothing else kind of falls into play. And I think that's the biggest barrier that we have. We may have to use our community churches. Sometimes, people listen to their pastors and to their priests and to their clergy before they listen to their physician. And so it's another way to get them involved, have hospitals involved in community centers where they spend most of their time. And so this is another way where you can be in the community, be visible, have access, and then hopefully enroll people uh, as they feel comfortable.
That is fantastic. You're absolutely right. I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. Let's shift a little bit to specifically on diabetic retinopathy. In your career, what are some of the breakthroughs that you have witnessed, whether it's a treatment or whether it's a medication, as a result that's come from clinical trials from when you first started to now?
So that's a great question. Diabetes is the leading cause of blindness in the working population. And there's different types of diabetes, which we talked about on this show many times. The most common loss of vision is from diabetic macular edema, when you have leaky blood vessels that affect the very central part of your vision where you can't see very well. And then there's other forms of diabetes where there's abnormal blood vessels that grow, that bleed in your eye, and then they have much more detrimental effects, like retinal detachments and vitreous hemorrhages. Up until probably a decade and a half ago, the way that we treated individuals with diabetes was with laser, and we used to bring them in. We do what's called a fluorescein angiogram. We put a little dye in the veins, and we see where the abnormal vessels were. We see where the leaking vessels were, and we apply laser to those areas. The problem with that is that the best that we were able to do over the course of 20 years of doing laser was to slow down someone's disease. We prevented moderate and severe vision loss by 50%, but very few people actually improved in vision. Now, fast forward this to about 2006, when we had the first drug approved. The first drug actually was approved for a macular degeneration. It was later then approved for a diabetic macular edema, but it's the same medication. But when these individuals were approved in the mid 2000s, it really changed the landscape. We saw individuals losing vision with no therapy to maybe gaining vision. And this was like a 15-letter difference. A 15-letter difference is a significant gain in vision. That's a difference in quality of life. It's a vision from driving and not driving. It's a vision from reading and not reading. This has really changed the landscape. And so now we're at the point where not only are trying to improve someone's vision, but now we've taken that same concept, because we didn't know at the time this medication was going to be so powerful. And actually, in the trial, there were people that received treatment. There were people that didn't receive treatment. It was standard of care. So it was really laser versus injections. And once you saw the profound impact, once the individuals in the laser, after 2 years, were allowed to get therapy, they never caught up. So we learned a lot from a trial that early treatment leads to better results. And if you delay therapy, you cannot get that vision back. So now we treat people early. And so now we've moved the ball even further, where we've done the same trials and we've looked at, can we decrease people from progressing if they have certain levels of disease? Can we keep them out of surgery? Can we reduce the number of lasers? Can we keep the vision? And all those answers has been yes, yes, and yes. The biologics that we have, that we treat people in the eyes with, from the trials that we've done, and now we have numerous amount of medications, they all have pretty much done the same thing in terms of improving, have a rapid improvement, and maintaining over 3 to 5 years of therapy. And that has really impacted our lives. It's very rare that I have someone, if they stay on therapy, do we have them to lose vision? Now, here's the problem. In a clinical trial, we get the best results because people are coming in on a scheduled appointment. They have that family, right? They have that pod of people that are always calling them, making sure they get that ride, and they come into the clinic and they're getting their therapy. But in the real world, just like you're in the Starbucks today, life happened. Your son had a baseball game. You couldn't make it home in time. Well, in the diabetic world, life happens. They may have an infection. They may get hospitalized. They can't make that appointment. And so what you see is that they often get undertreated, and they have this wide fluctuations of therapy, where over time, although they're having therapy, the visual acuity never is never as good as we see in the clinical trial. And that's really, really hard to reproduce. So let's take that one step further. So when our medications were first approved, they were given on a monthly basis. Now we're extending people out to 50% are getting injections every 4 weeks after the first year, if they're stable. And that's amazing. So we're looking at the same medications, changing the biologics a little bit, having them to work longer, so the burden of therapy is not as great. So we went from not having great therapy, where people were not gaining any vision, to improving more than 3 lines of vision, but needing frequent injections, to now needing less injections and still maintaining the same level of vision. So that has all been done in the last 15 years.
As a commenter said, that is fascinating, because you're talking about significant impact and change due to clinical trials. and less burden on the patient. Right now, they do have to be adherent
in a short period of time, by the way.
in a shorter period of time, and so you're going from lasers to now. Now you said some terms that I want to kind of help explain for our audience. What is a biologic? Because we just hear like that's a new word here recently, and if you're not in healthcare or medication in the medical community, what is a biologic? What does that mean?
So when I say biologics, the medications that we have available today are pretty much injections that go directly in the eye. They go right to the source, which is good because your whole body don't really see it, and so we don't have a whole lot of side effects. But it does go directly in the eye, so that is a burden for people to come in. And I know that may sound scary, but it's a process that we help them to get comfortable with that process. But a biologic is a medication that is genetically engineered to actually do something. So these are antibodies. We actually we genetically engineer an antibody to actually target um, part of your body that causes leaky blood vessels or abnormal blood vessels to grow. And by cutting down certain factors, blood vessels, if we stop them from being leaky, the swelling in the eye goes down, and then hopefully the visual acuity will improve. Or if there's abnormal blood vessels, you cut off their way to grow. These are called growth factors, vascular endothelial growth factors. They're growth factors on your endothelial cells, which are part of your blood vessels. And by inhibiting those factors, you can shrink down blood vessels. This was really started in the tumor work. We found that using it was first discovered that there was this growth factor on pituitary bovine cells that were looked at in a lab, and they coined this as vascular endothelial growth factor because it's found in endothelium. And we found that by inhibiting this, we can make tumors regress. That tumors will go away. And there's a lot of similarities in the eye to how tumors grow, whether it's in macular degeneration or whether it's in diabetes. And so the problem with it is that it's an unstable molecule. It doesn't last very long. And that's the reason why it was on monthly injections. So now they're able to change it a little bit where they have a little bit longer efficacy. So they just change those binding affinities. So now the molecules are getting smaller. They're holding on to those areas more. So you don't have to give a big dose, but it has a much bigger punch. And they act different ways on similar pathways.
So, so for those of us that sat in the back of the classroom, it's really just targeted medicine antibodies that are genetically engineered. We already have antibodies in our body, so they're not putting anything new into your body. Your body generates antibodies, but these are genetically engineered to do a specific task in a specific area. So it's not something where you're taking an oral medication and it's going all through your bloodstream, and it could have side effects on areas that weren't even it was supposed to help. But now you take that injection and put it right into the eye and let that antibody, let that biologic do the work that it was intended to do, which, as you said, lowers the side effects. And so,
And by the way, it only inhibits abnormal blood vessels. So it does not do anything to normal blood vessels. So your normal blood vessels stay the same. It's only targeting abnormal blood vessels. So when when your body is stressed from a problem, um, let's use the eye for example, is stressed from diabetes or stroke in the eye or macular degeneration, um, there's these factors that are upregulated. And so all they do is downregulate those factors to get it back to a steady state where your body is able to do the things that God wants it to do, which is really heal itself. And that's the best way that I think I can explain it. This new molecule that we have, it has two different pathways. One pathway pretty much tries to turn back the environment to where the environment was normal. Because when it's abnormal, things kind of go haywire. It's just trying to get it back to normalcy where your bodies can go through a healing mechanism and at the same time don't have those same blood vessels to be leaky or actually to grow.
Yeah, this is extremely fascinating because we're talking about cutting edge medication. We're talking about cutting edge treatments. Um, and just for our audience purposes, we want you to know that clinical trials are not always for medications. Now, that is a lot of the clinical trials, what a lot of them are for, is the development of new medications, but sometimes they're just the development of new treatments, right? Or they're just to see if one treatment is better than the other. For example, let's say like some medications are better if you take it in the morning. Why do they know that? Because they did a clinical trial with that medication and had people take it in the morning, and some people took it in the evening, and some people took it at night, some took it midday, and sometimes at night. And they measured the results of that medication, and they say, hey, it's best to take it in the morning. Or they say, oh, it's best to take it with food because of the impact that it has on your body. They learn all of that information from clinical trials. They're not making it up. They're not saying, oh, this is, we're just going to say this is better with food. No, it's gone through the clinical trials. Another thing that comes through clinical trials are those side effects, right? So people report back and they say, "Oh, this is how it impacted me. It made me sleepy. It made me sick. It made me hungry. I gained weight." All of those things that you hear on those commercials, all of those side effects, that is as a result of the clinical trials, and they have to report that to get that medication approved to the FDA. They have to say, "Hey, it can cause this," and all of those people that were in that trial reported those side effects, and they were significant enough to where they have to report that. And so, those are the things we get from clinical trials that I think we tend to take for granted a little bit as a general population. We just say, "Oh, and we kind of laugh about it because some of those lists are really really long. But it's important to hear those lists and to understand that the people that were in the trial are the reason why you know what the potential side effects are those medications are.
And Alice, you have to remember, we all love to have benefits of things, but we don't want to give up things. It's kind of like our military. We sleep well at night because there's someone protecting our country. Someone gave up their time to be in the trial so that you can have better access to actually better care. And that's another reason to get involved in trials. This could be a way that you just wanted to give back in something. So it may, you can look at it as benefiting yourself, but this will also benefit other people. And out of these trials, not just come how something is done from an efficacy standpoint or safety, but is also from these trials we could pick out which individual which may be more beneficial for these trials. So it helps govern the guidelines of therapy, who may benefit the most. And so there's a lot of things that we do that we do sub analysis on in order to maximize that therapy. And I think that's really critical because ultimately what we really want to do in medicine is cultivate a therapy which is individualized to you. And the only way you can do that is to have all those individuals represented in a trial, so we could individualize that therapy for that particular individual.
Absolutely, and in the reporting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. In the reporting of if there's enough significant enough participants, particularly participants of color, they can determine if an alteration of that medication needs to be made when it's being prescribed. And so they say, all right, well, you're African American, you're good. African Americans typically have this side effect, or they would do better if they did this with this particular medication. You can have that type of variance. You can have that type of specific information for your ethnicity, so you could have a better response from a medication or a treatment. But if we don't have enough people in the trial to be able to make that determination, that's not going to come until years later, and that has to do a review, and they have to get all this information back, and then it takes a long time to say, oh, black people don't do well with this medication, because once it's on the market, it's it's harder to get that data, and to have that data have an impact.
So I do want to give one shout out to one of your sponsors of your programs. I see them here, just Genentech. Genentech has what's called, and we did talk about different trials, and we talked about phase 1, 2, and 3, but there's also something called a phase 4 trial. A
Okay.
phase 4 trial is when a drug is already approved. They're using an approved drug to actually look at it in a different way.
Oh wow.
So in one of the drugs that was approved, let's say a year and a half ago, for diabetic macular edema, there was a not good representation of minorities in that trial for diabetic macular edema. So Genentech decided to do a phase 4 trial. It's the first of its time, if it's first of its kind, looking at underserved populations who were not well represented in trials to see how that medication fared. And what they did is that they compare individuals on the new medication compared to one of the standard medications um, that we typically use for diabetes. But the trial was only limited to Blacks, Hispanics, Asian Pacifics, Pacific Islanders, and Native Americans. These are the only individuals that were allowed to be in the trial because they were not well represented. We also have 2 sites in Africa, and it's the first time that an African country have been enrolled in a very similar trial. And I'll be happy to tell you that that trial enrolled much earlier than we thought. They were able to reach out to principal investigators like myself in those communities that had a strong connection with that community. And so they didn't just go to the big institutions. They were strategically thinking about what was some of the barriers that we talked about earlier. There were videos done. There were videos done in Spanish, so Spanish-speaking individuals could understand the consent. The consents were done as cartoons where anyone with a 3rd grade level can understand why we are doing this clinical trial. We broke down the barriers. We took care of childcare. We took care of their transportation. We gave them a little car for gas. If the other eye had a problem, they received free therapy, free treatment as well. So if you had no insurance, you're going to get the best. You're going to get the best care because we're treating both eyes. And this was a very, very great trial. We're going into our 2nd year of this trial, and this is the first time of its kind. And so we're really excited to learn the results from this population. I don't know those results yet, but I suspect that they will be positive. But I really give kudos to the company because they are the first ones that have done this, at least in the ophthalmology space.
Well, shout out to Genentech for that. I appreciate them being proactive, right, and saying, you know what, the fact that there wasn't a lot of Black people or people of color in the original trial, so they said, hey, let's do a phase 4 trial, which I just learned tonight. So that's fantastic. Let's do a phase 4 trial to really see the efficacy it has in people of color, and so that was one groundbreaking for a pharmaceutical company to do that, and then to say, okay, let's go to Africa, right, and go to the original people of color and see and do some, again, no cost care to people that need this care. And so you're talking about, not only are you working for the development of a treatment or medication that could be more effective in people of color, the people that are participating in the trial are getting the top-notch care at no cost to them and their families. And so it's a win-win. Now, you mentioned,
And I do think this resonated with the community better for a trial because I had the ability to tell them that this medicine was already approved. And so that did have a positive connotation in helping enroll patients versus, well, doc, I don't want to be a lab rat. I don't understand because we hear these people to say these sort of things. But to tell them that they're going to get either 1 or 2 agents, both of which are approved for your condition, I really think helped that discussion. And that was one reason why we're able to enroll this trial so fast.
yeah, that's fantastic. So you mentioned one thing about being a principal investigator, and I've heard that one of the barriers could be is that when people of color are going to these trials, they don't see anybody that looks like them. How do we get more people of color to be principal investigators, to be site managers, to be the frontline workers along all of the pathways to get into a trial? So when I come in there, I want to see somebody that looks like me because that representation matters, and I can feel much more comfortable seeing somebody that looks like me that's running the trial versus somebody that doesn't.
Well, from a PI standpoint, I think that you need a diverse team. And so that, it requires having someone to speak Spanish, someone, that may be African American, maybe someone that's Asian. I mean, this can be a very broad team, but you need a broad team that represent the community that you represent. So I think that just happens. That goes to you employing the right people. When it comes to people that myself, I think it comes to mentorship. I think it's really important for us to reach out to individuals when they're in their residency and their fellowships. Get involved in a trial, get involved in a study, write a paper, and then we hope that stimulates knowledge of you actually wanting to do more clinical research or even bench research. And once you find that, then you go into someone that has a lab and you understand how that lab works. If you are working by yourself, how can an individual physician become a PI? I have a buddy down in Texas. He's one of the biggest recruiters for clinical trials, and he's a solo black practitioner. I have no idea how he does it. He has a phenomenal staff. I think the staff is really the most important thing. But he went out on his own and figured out, well, how can I do this? For me, it's easy. I'm part of a big group. There's 15 doctors. I have 250 employees. I have 3 trial centers. So for me, it's not hard to develop that. But I think it's really important for young physicians to take the opportunity just to look at some of the positive that they can give back to their community and working on medications that could be groundbreaking. I also think it's important for them to understand there's a lot of physicians now are having like not really second lives, but having other interests outside just medicine, and they have a relationship with industry, and so that could be talking for them about their medications and educating other doctors. It could be talking at medical meetings, or it could just be getting involved in clinical trials. That's what we do. We get involved in clinical trials. So when a company has a certain agent that they want to look at, they will contact us. We would do what's called a feasibility to see if we have a patient population or if it's something that we're interested in. And we have the right to turn a trial down too. We are approached by more people than not, but we strategically pick out trials that we think may be valued, and for companies that have a long track record, because safety is really important when it comes to trials. And then it kind of goes from there. I think it's also important to reach out to the companies and let them know if you need support in your research area, if you need them to go through some of the charts to find the right patients. When it comes to recruiting, I think Black and brown people, I think we have to be intentional. When the trial is designed, I think we have to make sure that the trial is not set so narrow that we exclude certain populations. When it comes to diabetes, for example, many of my Black patients are excluded because their A1C is too high. We always cap that at 10. We cap, the renal function at a certain level. Blacks tend to have a higher A1C level. They tend to have higher creatinine and protein levels. And so therefore, just on that alone, even if they had interest, they were not allowed to be in clinical trials. So we have to look and see how we could change these indices, still get healthy people that can complete the trial, and still not be exclusionary. So I think all those things are really important. And the docs have to be just comfortable in talking to people about trials that may have a higher mortality and morbidity that may benefit from these medications.
Absolutely. So if you want to learn more on the blackdoctor.org website, there is a tab that says clinical trials, and there's a clinical trials resource center, and you can learn about active and ongoing trials on a variety of conditions. Because as Dr. Coney is talking about, there is a law called Fedora, and that law is saying that companies now, when they submit, they have to have a plan, a explicit plan on how they're going to recruit and include people of color into their trial. And if they don't have enough, guess what? It does not get approved. And so they have to have a plan on how they're going to recruit. And so you are really holding the cards, and also by not participating, folks, you're holding back, you're slowing down newer treatments and medications getting to market because they have to get this done. And so it's up to us. Let's move that number. I think the last numbers I heard was like 3 to 5% on average in terms of people of color, Black people participating in trials, which is too low. Again, my personal goal when I was doing these things is like, hey, let's get it up to at least match our percentage in the population. Um, but for something like diabetes, I say let's match the percentage of diabetics, right? And so it's not 13% of Black people that are diabetic. We have a disproportionate number of diabetics. And so we need to match that number as well in these trials. And so as we're wrapping up here, I want to give another shout out to the sponsor of both seasons of Open Your Eyes, Genentech. They have been a wonderful partner, and it just shows their commitment to our community. It shows their commitment to this cause. Dr. Coney explained just a few minutes ago how committed they are to it. And so I'm not making an infomercial for Genentech, but I will give credit where credit is due in terms of their commitment to changing the landscape of medications and treatments and making it more inclusive and make it more representative of the population that they are here to serve. And so I appreciate all that they're doing in that. In the final moments here, Dr. Coney, is there anything that you wanted to say that you forgot about, or is there something that another point that you want to hammer home and you say, hey, look, I need you to remember this when we're talking about clinical trials?
Well, I think advancing inclusive research, I think, is a very complicated topic. I think that we're at the point um, in our nation where we're at a tipping point. COVID has really shown light on the cracks of individuals that have been marginalized and have not been well treated. I think that companies understands that. I think physicians understand that, and I think that people are trying to make the right decisions going forward. And part of this is having representation in clinical trials. I guess what I want to leave you with is that you really don't know when there's a trial, when there's not a trial. I think it's really important for you to have that discussion with your physician. Ask your doc, is there any other options out there for me? Is there any trials being evaluated for my condition? Where can I go to look that information up? Oftentimes, the NIH, the NEI will have all these things written down, and you can go to see all the trials which are done by the government. There's a push to make sure that that everyone is representing these trials, and it's true that these trials may not get approval, and so the government is also trying to have a hard push for this. But having that discussion with your physician is important. Understanding the pros and cons, holding them to the feet when you don't feel comfortable, I think is important, and let them know what your issues are. Whether it's, hey, I have a problem in traveling. What does it look like for me, out of cost? See if those barriers could be addressed. Oftentimes, they have it in their budget to address these things because they really want you to be part of those trials. And I would tell you that this is probably some of the most gratifying patients that I see are those that have been involved in trials, and they really have become like family, and they have not just helped themselves out from an efficacy standpoint from getting better, but what they've given back to the community have really set the guidelines and the gold standards on how we treat other people. And so they are the heroes. They are the heroes in medicine because they are the ones that volunteer their time to come in and sacrifice, their bodies for science. And we appreciate them. I appreciate this podcast for putting this important topic out there. But I really think that we all should also be able to have that discussion with our doctors and ask them about clinical trials. I think that's the last piece that I'll talk about because, you don't know what you don't know. And we have to learn how to be advocates for ourselves because sometimes the physicians are just so busy or they may not think about it. And you need to get in trials earlier before something is more advanced or before they institute some other type of therapy.
Look, that's a mic drop moment right there. And I would just reiterate by saying we did some surveying on blackdoctor.org. And the number one answer for why they were not participating in clinical trials was my doctor never asked. And so that's the number one reason. So have those conversations with your physicians, particularly if you're newly diagnosed, right? If you get a new diagnosis, you say, "Hey, doc, is there some clinical trials?" Because that really will spark that conversation when you're talking about treatment, and it can open up a whole new level of discussion with your physician. But you want the doctor to ask, but hey, my mother always told me a closed mouth does not get fed, and so you have to open up sometimes and just say, "Hey, doc, are there any clinical trials that are around this condition that we could look into?" And if they don't know, make them find out. That's what you're paying them for. So I have to have them do that for you and find out on your own. So, Doc, this has been a wonderful, wonderful time. Even though I've got the music at the front of Starbucks, I got my. I even got my little latte, so they'll let me sit in here for an hour. But I appreciate all that you're doing these 2 seasons, and I'm hoping that Genentech uh, does a third, because we need to continue to get this information out about our vision health. I want to shout out to Dr. Marianu and all them over at the CVEA for the shows that they do, Seeing Eye to Eye, on a monthly basis. But Doc, I want to thank you for. I know how busy you are. I talked to Mary, and I got a real great relationship with Mary about you and your schedule, and you're doing it. This is a labor of love, and so to give your time uh, each month to do this show is greatly appreciated by me and all of the viewers that are watching this program. So I just want to say thank you.
Ellis, it's really been a pleasure. Thanks for 2 wonderful seasons, man. I think we have a lot of great content. If anyone have not seen the content before, I highly recommend looking at all the content. They're all different shows.
Yep.
And if you don't know diabetes after looking at this podcast, I don't know what else will help you. But I'm hoping that this will guide you through your journey and having those discussions with your physician so you feel comfortable about those decisions. So ultimately, you can have better care for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And look, if you just watch the show with Dr. Coleman, she we had some really good guests this season as well. So I would say go to the YouTube page and just check out the whole series there on YouTube. But it's so much fun. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I definitely will see you all again soon. So please like and share this show. If we're signing off, I see all my folks there. Please like and share this show, and we will see you all. Happy holidays. Let me say that too. Happy Thanksgiving. It's next week. I know we always want to skip to Christmas. I had to tell my wife today that she was asking about Christmas presents. I said, I don't think about Christmas until after Thanksgiving. And maybe I need to get better about that, but I really don't. So she was asking what I want for Christmas. I was like, can I get through Thanksgiving? Can I get my turkey first? You know, so, but happy Thanksgiving to everybody that celebrates it. And also, if I don't talk to you again, happy holidays to you and your family.
All right, Ellis, happy Thanksgiving to you too.
All right, take care.
All right, bye bye.